I've been playing a lot of Minecraft lately, and I don't mean the 2 week Minecraft nostalgia phase that everyone goes through every couple of months, years, whatever your nostalgia clock is set at. I did have that back and forth relationship with the game too, though, for a while. No, right now, I've been playing it constantly. When I wake up, my first urge is to make progress on my current build. In between the other projects I do throughout the day for my social channels, I'd feel the pull to just log on for a few more minutes. Place a few blocks, gather a few supplies. It's almost become an all-consuming obsession. Almost. Hi, I'm mecatlanemi. I'm an indie VTuber who just started streaming this year. I trust the algorithm knows who it brought here, so I won't waste your time explaining any of that and plugging the links you can find on your own. You're either buckled in or you're not, and I respect that either way. So, let's just get right to the rambling. This all started when I started my channel. You see, I've been playing a lot of Jurassic World Evolution 3. The game is rich with ambience and filled with powerful tools to create your own dream Jurassic theme park. And if you love dinosaurs or the Jurassic franchise like I do, its appeal is so goddamn magical. It took me back to a place in my childhood that, like many of us often waver with throughout our lives, I'd almost lost touch with. And with that awakening of wonder and creativity, I couldn't help remembering my old Minecraft world, languishing in the background of my desktop where I'd hoped to return one day. Some of the buildings I had planned or had been doing in Jurassic World Evolution were builds I had intended to use in my private Minecraft world one day. I just never got around to it. So I booted it up and started playing, and that's where the usual choice paralysis hit. I was daunted by the enormity of the projects I had in mind and all the tasks I would have to undertake. I started exploring the world to find the perfect place to do my builds, just as an excuse to procrastinate the commitment to undertake such an endeavor, and buy myself some time to consider whether this was something I wanted to do after all. I've always been the kind of person to come up with grand designs and plans, imagining a finished project that I could be proud of, but as the planning and mapping out of a path to get there unfurled, I'd become discouraged. There were too many things I'd need to do, too many ways for me to fail along the way. There was too much at stake sometimes for some of these very real life plans for me to take the risk. And eventually I think I kind of gave up on a lot of my ambitions over the years. I just didn't believe in myself. It isn't all doom and gloom though. I went through a lot of therapy, devouring every bit of content I could on my problems from licensed professionals wherever I could find them. And eventually I found myself again. Life is not a straight line though, and recently I'd gone through some tough times in my life again, and I was looking for a safe space to channel my ambitions again so that I could build myself back up by tackling smaller projects and things I left by the wayside over the years. I always wanted to be a content creator, for example. It was the perfect outlet for me to tell my stories, and so I started taking steps towards this with live streaming, because to me, the only motivation worth doing anything in life is connection with others. I know people say to do art for your own sake, to do things in life for you, but frankly, that has never really resonated with me. I think it comes from a place of good intentions, but I think it's mainly coming from the mouths of people who take their connections for granted. I never really felt connected to others. I always felt apart. And so to me, it felt obvious that most people giving that advice didn't understand how important their connections were in giving them the confidence to see their own projects through. So as I wandered through my world seed alone, searching for the right place to call my final and permanent home, I wondered why I was even doing it. I'd already settled on a plateau that was good enough, content to build a manageable, scaled-down, realistic version of the vision I had in mind. At least, that's what I told myself. In retrospect, I don't think I was ready when I first set up the location. Everything happens as it happens, and I had to go through my journey to find the place to do it, and it turns out part of that journey was connection. You see, I started my Minecraft journey like many over a decade ago, playing all the way from before Hunger was even introduced, so long ago that my memory fails to recall the details properly. I've watched many YouTube historians reflecting on the history of the game with the confusion of a 60-year-old grandma wondering what the heck Robux are and why her grandkids want it. There aren't many people in my circle who stuck with the game like that. Sure, we've all tried to get back into the game here and there over the years, but especially at this point, it had become apparent no one else was as attached to the little block game as I was. Maybe they didn't have Lego sets as kids, I don't know. Probably should be something I know about my friends, but that brings me back to my connection issues. Without people to play with, I didn't know if I had the faith in myself to see this project through. However, like many of you probably do, I watched a lot of YouTube Minecrafters over the years, staying connected to one of my favorite games as best as I could, even from a distance. And that's how, like many of you I assume, I found Mogswamp. As I wandered the world and found the perfect location for my build, honestly, I thought of him. As a player who had been playing on the same world as long as I had simply been playing, deleting, and restarting, and doing it all in super flat no less, I couldn't help but feel a little bit touched by his determination. I felt a connection. Parasocial or not, though he admittedly seems like a super genuine and positive dude, I'm not one to ignore the elephant in the room and admit it's not like I know him or anything. However, the effect he had was real. And I thought to myself, by golly, if Mogswamp can do that, then I can at least do this. You see, Minecraft is a game about building whatever you want to your heart's content in an endless world made of blocks. Some variation of that is probably what you've heard or said to people when they asked about what the game is about. The question doesn't really get asked a lot anymore. By now, Minecraft has a level of brand recognition that reaches people all around the world from different cultures and nations, holding a level of impact that is comparable to Pokemon, another game that had a deep effect on me. I'm old. I'm a vampire. Look at my teeth. Sue me. So, with such a huge cultural impact, it's not surprising it doesn't really get asked anymore. Even that grandma I mentioned knows what Minecraft is at this point. And so that's what I did. I built, and 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 I'm actually still not even done with the central pyramid I started with. A lot of my time was just spent digging out the materials for the foundation without a beacon because there ain't no way I'm dealing with the weather right now. But as I placed block after block in rain or shine, dealing with pillager after zombie after creeper, mining out diamond after lapis after coal just to keep the build going since I built my XP farm way too far away and I don't want to go all that distance even with an established nether highway just to make some repairs, I started to feel a sense of pride and joy I had rarely ever felt before in my life. And more importantly, I started to get it. I started to get what Minecraft was about. How every little thing from mechanics to world building and the glaringly obvious end poem in the game interconnects in order to reinforce the themes of the game. Its message. Its story. Because in a way, Minecraft has always had a story. And I don't mean a story about ancient civilizations, multi-dimensional magical decay, or a heroic triumph over the remnants of monstrosities beyond our capacity to comprehend. It's a story about you, about mankind, and nostalgia for a time when all that was ever asked of us was to thrive, to exist, to just be. So for me, the question of how we got from that to this
line block, but under it put a diamond block so we can duplicate it. Then place
creates a sense of nostalgia that I think has sparked endless debates online about progression, extrinsic versus intrinsic motivation, the degree to which features and additions have been successfully implemented. It feels more like a meme to me. The supposed outrage and controversy over Mojang's handling of features over the years. And that's probably partly because it is to an extent. It can't be denied by farming outrage and declaring straw man out groups. Content creators can gain a lot of traction with their audiences as the reasonable or sensible ones who are calmly deliberating. But it can't be denied that there has always been a vocal minority in any fandom space, those voices that can be pretty toxic and obnoxiously loud. Plus, I've seen it for myself, so I know it's probably legitimate enough. I just don't keep up with discourse that heavily to weigh in on the accuracy of it. I say that to predict there may be some of you who see this discussion as moot. Maybe even most of you. And maybe I'm not saying anything you already know. But if my YouTube algorithm, and probably yours too, are anything to go by, it sort of seems like Minecraft has lost its identity along the way, doesn't it? The videos I'm bombarded with are all of heavily modded servers, large-scale super builds using all sorts of edit tools or optimized resource farm tutorials. I've always been of the mind that the more you mod a game, the more you just want to play a different game. And while it's true to a degree that if you only have a handful of games, modding is a great way to create awesome experiences and memories using what little resources are available to you, one of the things about Minecraft that is often hailed as a strong point is it can run on a potato. As someone with a relatively standard gaming PC, close to aging out of the recommended specs of modern day games, even my simple mod loadout is enough to turn my tower into a space heater. No joke, my wife and I actually refer to our computers as the heaters. So I think I speak for a lot of people when I look at this asking, how did we get here? Why does it feel like Minecraft has lost its identity, and why does it feel like everyone can seemingly agree on the idea that Minecraft hasn't lived up to its potential, be it implicitly through mods or explicitly through subreddits like the golden age of Minecraft? Well, to give you my answer, let's take it back a bit to that 2-week Minecraft phase, and how Minecraft's mechanics are perfectly tailored to reflect yourself back at you. Minecraft's mechanics aren't just simple, they're transparent. You start in a world punching a tree to get some wood, the most basic survival element of any survival game. Or maybe you find a village to begin with the assistance of an already established civilization. You build a crafting table as the recipe unlocks, and create tools to improve your standing against the most basic threats, the monsters in the dark and hunger. For those of us returning, it's easy to overlook some of the things right in front of us. But let's look at it like it's our first time. Look at what the world is actually made of. The mechanics, the rules. When you boot up the game, you're presented with your surroundings and a HUD, showing slots for items, hearts, one of the universal video game shorthands for communicating a health bar, and some kind of meat drums, a pretty recognizable symbol representing some sort of hunger bar to anyone with any idea of what a survival game is. The game has quickly communicated that you can hold items, and your most important priorities are to stay alive and find food to do that. Experiences can differ on how you get there. These opening moments can be incredibly open-ended, and some people might have a little bit of trouble parsing the information on the pixelated UI display. But most people come into Minecraft knowing the old punch a tree joke. Man, I just realized how old I am. Like, it feels pretty logical by now, but I actually remember when it was an absurd element of Minecraft that we found humorous. Just suddenly appearing into existence in a world and punching a tree like a maniacal lumberjack deity that can't stand to see that tree exist. Anyways, eventually, you begin to unlock crafting recipes as you pick up items with a helpful little pop-up on the screen. Even players who've never played a survival game before get a neat little overlooked hand, in the form of the bonus chest option that most any gamer can probably reasonably assume to be a starter kit, though I admit this is kinda a bit weaker than the rest of the game's legibility. Either way, the game's recipe prompts will lead the player to experiment in opening their inventory and start menu, eventually discovering for themselves some of the titular crafting side of the mechanics. As you start exploring it, the items move from your hand to the crafting interface, and you're taught how to make items. It clicks pretty quickly from there by now, even if you don't know what a survival game is all about already, and you move to mining in the transparently titled Minecraft. At first, it's all wonder and excitement. You learn what a lot of the blocks do, what they look like, and how to craft a majority of the items. You discover the nether portals, start intuiting many of the hints of the game that there is more to be discovered, and experiment with redstone. For those of us way back before a lot of the updates, a lot of this we just had to communicate to each other on forums and wikis, but it was still much the same magical experience of discovery. During this early game, you come to realize that solving the issue of hunger and the various hazards like monsters, drowning, falls, and lava are all solvable with a few well-placed blocks or items. Through its legible systems, you develop efficient methods of gathering resources, finding the best tools and materials for them, and begin to feel a really potent sense of accomplishment. You learn to use the light to ward away the mobs after several experiments in locating that one dark spot in your build that they seem to keep coming from. Crops become steady and renewable resources of food to stave off starvation. Villagers become indispensable partners that you've locked up in trading halls. And you might even have learned how to use redstone to do a lot of resource collection for you. The game gave you enough to feel human, creating a sense of vulnerability that has finally been conquered, and you've become the god of this new world, this build, this seed. You might have a fully fleshed out settlement or a single castle. Hell, maybe you just have a satisfyingly spacious hole in a mountain that all this fits inside. I've seen some pretty weird playstyles, but they're all valid. So you decide to rest on your laurels and you come back the next day to do some more building on a new idea you have. It was a lot of fun learning all the mechanics of the game, so surely you'll have just as much fun as satisfaction continuing to create in this awesome world, right? You log on the next day and you head over to your collection of shulker chests, already filled with the materials you'll need for the project from autocrafters and super smelters. You get to building, flying around your build to get everything just right. Maybe it's a smaller scale build and you complete it in one sitting and move on to the next one the next day. Maybe it's a build that takes a few days to complete. Either way, all the while, something about it doesn't feel the same anymore. The building starts to feel tedious, whether it's stopping every 10 minutes to sleep so that phantoms don't spawn, or collecting food to keep you going. Maybe it's just the act of placing blocks that feels too slow now. One day, you log off, and you don't even think about your next build. Your world just sits there, stagnating, forgotten. That was my experience. I mean, I've never really built super smelters or industrial-sized mob grinders, and I actually didn't even know autocrafters were a thing until a year after they were added. I'm too lazy to do all that anyways. But time and time again I'd hit a wall in the game, following build tutorials and strat guides online to as efficiently gather the materials as I needed as possible. I really needed that much. I kept my build humble. I told myself I knew who I was. I needed to think realistically, scale down. I always bite off more than I can chew, the words echoed in my head, with every decision I've ever made reinforcing the words I'd heard all my life. But the online algorithms, they didn't forget. YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, wherever you get your build ideas and tutorials from, they all remember you as a user who enjoyed Minecraft content, and they notice your dwindling interest in it. They start feeding you content on your next obsession, but eventually, there they are again. Minecraft Civilizations, Minecraft Storytime, Minecraft News, Minecraft Mod Showcases, and you remember how much fun you used to have in those early days. When I'd come across them, I'd think, this is it. This is the inspiration I've been waiting for, and I'd go back to my old world and, well, this is still pretty tedious, isn't it? I'd decide to start over from scratch because I'd remember the old days, the glory days of learning the mechanics, and maybe it's been a few updates and some of the farms don't work the same anymore, or I just can't quite remember well enough to my liking how something works, and I'm back to learning the mechanics. Sometimes I'd flirt with the thought of trying out some cool mod packs, but something always held me back. Maybe for yourself, you wanted to try out a cool looking mod pack that would give you a fresh experience, making you think similarly to those tempting thoughts of mine. Surely this time I'll have plenty to look forward to. Surely this will give me the motivation I need to feel like sticking with it. But every time, without fail, once I started building up my resources, making my way through the nether, remembering how everything works, satisfied in having accomplished my new objectives, it would start to creep in again. I'd feel the boredom of having conquered a world that once felt just barely survivable. Maybe this time I'd set a new goal. Collect every tool, every mob, every villager. Maybe I'd just log off, realizing the game already gave me what I was looking for and convincing myself I don't need to keep looking for anything, happy to repress the hunger to continue playing. Repress it. Repress it! Content with the nostalgic revisit that Minecraft seems to have subliminally planted in my brain with C418's haunting melodies. It felt like the game was designed from the start to be something I would periodically revisit and never commit to. The thing is, I think the game was rigged from the start. Every time I would try to look for advice, people would say the same thing. Set goals. Play for whatever appeals to you most. I'd look to longtime players who had Forever Worlds running years, and none of them could clearly communicate with me what kept them playing. Like, maybe I wasn't listening at the time, but I know what stood out a lot of the time was always set your own goals. And I did, but nothing was changing. I didn't get it. Why was the game haunting me with the sense that there was something here beckoning me to enjoy, but no matter what I did, I couldn't find it? I looked on with envy at all these players who had people to play with, wishing somehow I could find people who were just as happy to play with me as the people in those videos were with each other. When you spawn into the world, you understand one thing. one objective from the transparent reveal of the hunger bar: survive. And so you do. And with the endless repetition of increasingly complex mechanics and discoveries to be made of tools, environments, and advancements that loop the reward centers of your brain, hacking your attention in that unique video game way, somewhere along the way, I think a lot of us get the wrong message. There have been jokes online about a subsection of the community that seems to have come to think of Minecraft as an imperialism simulator. A subsection that feels frighteningly real to me to a degree that I almost don't want to address it, but like I said, I think Minecraft is a reflection of the people that play it. And to further my point, I do have to talk about that. You see, while most of us get it on some fundamental level that perspective is missing the point of the game by such a wide margin, it's practically shooting in the opposite direction, I've only seen a few people that have even tried to broach the subject. Maybe people don't take it seriously, thinking it'll pass, or it's some quirky niche thing that doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Maybe they take for granted the same sense I do about the shared understanding of the community, or maybe they just struggle to adequately explain themselves and don't want to bother exploring it, and coming off as if they're policing the community. But I think exploring why it is that there's a group of people who so fundamentally misunderstand the point of the game is an important piece in shedding light onto why I struggle to get the game and why you might too. The way Minecraft rewards us, directly and indirectly with its mechanics, leading us to carve up the world, subjugate its inhabitants, and hoard all of its resources for ourselves, is a very real phenomenon. We're rewarded with XP and tangible resources for obtaining materials, smelting materials, destroying entities, and cleaving away through the various foundation of established societies and reshaping them to our liking. We then get rewarded for doing that with upgrades and items that allow us to do even more of that, more quickly, more efficiently, more coldly, until you're left with an automated industrial complex that has sucked all the soul out of the game, channeling it directly into our XP bar and coffers. Every expansion, every build, feeding that dopamine reward loop further and further as every advancement is displayed clearly and communicated immediately with the satisfying dings of success and orderly displays of our achievements, tangible and measurable. The same trick most video games know to do to keep us hooked, because real life isn't like that. Real life is messy. Progress isn't displayed on an XP bar. The world doesn't always give us a neat and obvious upgrade to everything that came before. We have to decide for ourselves if that new car or new relationship or new job was better than the last, weighing the pros and cons of it all while taking into account a multitude of complicating graying factors such as miscommunications, depreciation, and grass is greener syndrome. Clarity, legibility, is attractive. It's sexy, but it's dangerous. Its seductive pool muddying the interpretation of even the simplest objectives. Because like I said, the game communicates to you, then all you have to do is survive. But through its mechanics, it's easy to get pulled into an interpretation of that directive that says, conquer. Because all that learning, expanding, controlling, while rewarding to our brains, is not survival. None of it was asked of you. None of it was needed. It just made survival more convenient, to the point that the game has practically come to play itself by the end of the loop in these cases. Because I think most of us, if we stop to think about it for a moment, could tell anyone that to survive just means to exist. And some of us can get caught up in that feedback loop of reward. Meanwhile, the rest of us are self-aware enough to know that whatever they're doing over there is not survival. That's why I got caught up in the 2-week Minecraft loop. Or if the memes are anything to go by, most of us. We're caught up in the repetition of our brain's own reward feedback loop. We remember the excitement and thrill of when everything was new, chasing that over and over with band-aid fixes like new seeds, mod packs, and more importantly, optimization. We optimize our farms, our grinders, our building, and in turn, we optimize the simplest fun of the game out of it. Despite that, like I said, for some reason, I would resist using mods that fundamentally change too much about the game. Because if the game was asking me to just experience it, I wanted to give it the chance to experience it as unfiltered as possible. Personally, I draw the line at War of 8 mods. It's a very short distance to that line, I know, but to me, if you aren't mining every block individually, you lose a lot of value in the work to gather resources. There's already plenty of ways in the game to increase mileage on your tools and the quantity of materials thanks to enchantments, so I don't see much of a need to speed up the process unless you're trying to performatively declare that you did it in survival. Letting trees fall in one go is fine for me, since that's how they work in real life, and if you use charcoal like I do, that's a lot of friggin' wood. Side note, I'm not against lava generators. I've just put it off for so long, and the binary quantities Minecraft uses is so satisfying to me. To perfectly smelt in quantities of 8 at a time that I can't just let it go yet. It's just like crack. I'll move on to lava eventually. I can quit at any time I want to, I swear! As I was saying, you might find a different line for yourself, and I'm not here to tell you how to play the game. Ultimately, I'm just trying to reach the kinds of people like me and encourage people to appreciate what the game has to offer at its most basic level, because, like I said at the beginning, I'm a sad, strange little man. However, I wouldn't be lying if I said it'd be nice if a couple of people came away from this video a little more interested in investing more effort into their game worlds. I think the more you sit with the game's mechanics, the more attempts you make to get that forever world up and running, the more you'll start to see what kinds of things you actually want from the game, rather than chasing the initial hype loop that the game hooks you with. Which brings me to the central beast, automation. Like I alluded to earlier, Minecraft has an impressive mechanic in the form of redstone that crafty players, if you'll excuse my word choice, have used to manage to create some truly spectacular and unique builds. I mean, once we started playing Minecraft inside Minecraft, I think it was safe to say we really peaked as a society. Exaggerations aside though, it's led to the problem of creating a certain way of playing the base game that is hard for me to ignore. Exploits and just plain brilliant design has turned much of Minecraft's harvesting mechanics into infinite resource glitches, producing resources in the background without any input by the player. It's not the only form this optimization comes in. If there's a problem in Minecraft, somebody's already solved it. Speedrunners have turned the game into a fast-paced and admittedly beautiful dance, drifting the community towards blazing through the game's content by narrowing it down to only the most essential pieces of content you actually have to engage with in the game to get to the end. Players studying enchantment have managed to create some wildly overpowered tools and equipment, negating any hazards or effort as if turning survival world into creative without the use of commands. I know everyone has their own playstyle and has things about the game they don't care to engage with, find tedious, find just not fun. I myself always set up an XP farm, because Minecraft's enchanting system can feel a bit stingy, and frankly I'm so miserably bad at the game, I've come to need the extra help. Seriously, it's like a curse. I never reach level 40, because sometimes even right as soon as I hit level 30, I get myself killed in the dumbest ways. It's been this way since enchantments were first added. I don't know what's wrong with me, and I'm pretty sure plenty of people have their own quirks like that too, but the amount of players I've seen in their posted videos or live streams that just treat these things as the standard way of playing the game, using as much of it as their patience or skill level will allow, has always felt, to me, like something was lost. It's lonely out here for a guy like me, who minimizes the application of any of these skills pretty intentionally because, to me, it seems like the game is asking it of you. But dupers, super smelters, villager halls, speed strats, and massive grinders like iron farms that remove all the friction from the game are the most egregious examples of what I'm talking about. To be fair, I doubt dupers are nearly as controversial of a method as I'm talking about, as the effort to make them are often pretty niche, and you rarely see people use them as often as the rest of the examples, since they fall into exploit territory much more neatly than the other examples, and the resources they best provide for are a bit more niche than others, but I still felt like they were worth mentioning. So let me analogize with one of my other favorite video game experiences in recent memory. Managed democracy. Helldivers 2 is certainly a game. It has an incredibly dedicated fanbase who are enthusiastically immersed in its dystopian themes of a world overtaken by jingoistic ideals and xenophobic guns-blazing action. When the game blew up for its wild, overwhelming chaos, it drew players in by the hundreds of thousands. Nowadays, the game sits at a comfortable 50,000 players online and peaked around 150,000 with the recent Machinery of Oppression update event. You'll be hard-pressed to find a more wholesome and cooperative gaming experience, even among other PvE shooters. You can usually drop in and people are ready to help you or welcome your assistance with a spirited Super Earth salute, despite the usual flame wars common in video game community spaces about developer decisions, meta builds, and dissident misinformation disguised as harmless discourse over the intentions and methods of our way of life. And that's why I think it's a great comparison to me. Helldivers 2 managed to hook a group of players, I think, that have been looking for something few other games and game experiences offer nowadays out of a fear of alienating players. Ironically, considering Arrowhead Studios have openly admitted to struggling not to fall into the same pitfalls other developers warned them about. Arrowhead Studios built a game around friction. You don't play an overpowered, unstoppable super soldier in a power fantasy that convinces you you're the greatest thing since managed democracy, and that by comparison your teammates must be a bunch of hopeless monkeys playing on typewriters that are the reason your team is down 1-7 in a Creator Cup tournament. That never happens in real life. You were told right from the start with a survival rate screen on your Helldivers 2's in-game first-time boot-up that you're gonna die. A lot. Like 80% of the time. And it is a blast. Sure, the game's a bit buggy, and it's lost some of its players due to frustration with some of its content decisions, but for another example, just look at From Software. It's a game company known for making very polished and brutal game experiences that make you earn your victories, death after death after death. Elden Ring sold 30 million copies, and nearly 40% of players have seen that experience through to the end at least once. Bloodborne changed me as a person. I mean, to me, that sounds a lot like the average Minecraft experience. You gather a ton of resources, feel at the top of your game, turn around to bring 13 blaze rods home with you with all your sweet XP and loot, but you drop your card for just a moment, and you're in a pool of lava starting from scratch because you're not allowed to get past level 35. Fix enchanting, Mojang! Skill issues aside, Helldivers 2 offers that same gameplay experience in a shooter, where you're set against an onslaught of challenging enemies that sometimes feels like the devs are actually antagonizing you. Though I'd argue Dark Souls was way more explicitly antagonistic from the developers with the way most of those traps work. Like there's any way you're supposed to expect half the things they throw at you, and Arrowhead just seems to have trouble figuring out the best way to please their players, and struggles to remember issues in their code they've had to address like 50 times at this point. But I digress. People like feeling like they earned their rewards, and I think a lot of people come into Minecraft a lot like a certain segment of players did with Helldivers 2. As the game's early months settled and its committed players arose, there was a very clear deliberation being had in the community about whether or not Arrowhead knew what they were doing. Some players felt like the game was getting too easy, and they needed to turn it back up a notch, because you could get away with a whole mission without a single death beyond friendly fire incidents on the hardest difficulty. Others felt like they weren't feeling powerful enough, and while some of this discourse, can be attributed to skill levels, you could see inklings of the truth in the way some players would dive into lore context, or the patience level of divers you'd meet on higher difficulties. It was clear that a section of the player base hadn't read the fine print, and thought we were supposed to be some unstoppable forces of liberty, bulldozing over the enemies of freedom like wrecking balls of justice. And I'm still not sure many Helldivers have made peace with that core philosophy. Machinery of oppression and its absolute mockery of the arsenal we have had expanded since launch when playing on the game's hardest difficulty revived a lot of these conversations. Albeit likely because many players who hadn't played in ages joined the war for Cyberstan, and new recruits jumped on to difficulties they had no business being in without the proper equipment. As a regular level 10 diver, the current hardest difficulty in the game, I loved feeling completely lost in the blur of chainsaws, energy bolts, karate-kicking cyborgs, and glitchy Vox engines, despite my own occasional frustrations with some of the died because you set foot on Cyberstand glitches. Seriously, I wish I had footage of it, but while playing with some of my new diver friends for some fun, I blew up at least on 3 occasions to absolutely nothing around me. The faithful super citizen in me says the treacherous bots hid their minds with hologram devices like the cowards they are, but I can't deny the validity of the frustrations that many players had over the impossible clipping and climbing of the Vox engine's maneuverability, even if I found that aspect in and of itself a little charming. After a year of crazy power creep getting capped off with the leveler and breach hammer, it was nice to feel squishy and human again, you know? And considering the sentiments I heard while playing with the squad of divers I play with, I think it's safe to say it's the same for them. Was Cyberstan rough around the edges technically speaking? Yeah. Was it a grueling onslaught that maybe went on for a little too long? Probably. Will it be a great memory of an outstanding moment in immersion for the community? For me, absolutely. Even if others won't necessarily agree, but I know the memes have shown that at least a few divers still come back to prove that we have what it takes to be a Helldiver. But, like I said, I think some people make the same mistake of perceiving the game to be a power fantasy as they do with Minecraft. They hear the game is about building whatever you want, and they take that to its natural extreme. I draw the conclusion that I do about power fantasy because, like I've been complaining about the whole video, I often take for granted how powerful I begin to feel with my fully enchanted diamond equipment, and losing it all can be devastating. I start to think of the game as a power fantasy and not survival, so there's bound to be others who lose the same perspective. Unlike Helldivers though, you're given some very powerful tools to master the world that start off deceptively simple, even though like Helldivers, your objective shares a goal in mind: survive. While Minecraft pretty much has this as its only ethos, it does create a bit of an illusion that you have a mission to complete similar to Helldivers. And as a side note, before we move on from here, if you like Helldivers, please visit my friends' channels on Twitch as well. Budgierampage and Orangotango will be linked below. Budgie especially was a huge inspiration when I woke up one morning to her lovely Nelly Bells chirps for the first time in the background, as the YouTube algorithm decided to grace me with a new friend after being left on autoplay all night. I wouldn't be trying to reach others with this video if it wasn't for the two of them. Continuing with my topics though, I'm old enough to remember the controversy around the idea of even adding an end to Minecraft. Nowadays, it's pretty much accepted as a core part of the experience, and many people are looking forward to the not-so-secret update to its features. Speedrunning exploded once it was added, with players racing to develop the most efficient routes and parse the game's code to break down seed generation so they could better understand what the best seeds for reaching the end as fast as possible looked like. There had already been slow-going facets of the community exploring for oddities in the code, but the niche became more relevant suddenly as there became a reason for people to chase the same level of comprehension in the pursuit of faster times. Meanwhile, I've been on my world for about a year now, but I haven't bothered to get to the end. When it was first introduced, I took my enchanted iron armor and took on the end, slaying the ender dragon, and earned that iconic freed the end advancement. It was a new spectacle that I wanted to experience, but ever since, the biome and its depths never really appealed to me. Even with updates adding shulkers and elytra, to this day I have yet to earn my own wings, and play with humble backpacks added to my world where shulker boxes were meant to be a reason to make so-called progress. To me, therein lies a contradiction. Progression and the idea of it as a system in Minecraft is a bit of an oxymoron. There are better and better materials to develop better and better equipment out of, things to discover and dimensions to explore, even an end credit scene to reach. But real life has a lot of materials to find that are better for other purposes too. That doesn't mean we made progress towards something by discovering uses for them. That doesn't mean they were put there for that purpose. Humanity just upgraded to make survival more convenient. We explored in Ages of Expansion for a complex array of reasons historically, I won't overlook that, but to oversimplify it a bit, we rarely had a pressing need to gather more resources because the things we built were as necessary as we take them to be. Indoor air is nice, and it does save lives, but I know based on where I live, I don't actually need it. My computer does, poor thing, it seems like it's going to burst into flames some days, but am I making sense here? That's what I feel when I play Minecraft. C418's music has been called nostalgic, melancholic, the perfect ambience for playing Minecraft, and while I don't have the musical theory to break it down for you and explain how it manages to instill these emotions, I can tell you my perspective on why it hits different. I think the game hit on something I was looking for that I've seen a lot of people talk about but never quite name. I've heard the game described as a dead and lonely world, peaceful in its isolation if a bit eerie and sad, that you bring life to, reviving it with your presence. I've heard it described as a sandbox for expressing your imagination, calling for you to get back in touch with your inner child and explore your creativity. I've heard it described as a silly little blog game that is able to draw you in with its simplicity, and its haunting melodies are what do the real legwork of making you feel something. And I've heard all of these perspectives lean heavily on C418's music, painting an experience that feels uniquely Minecraft. To that last perspective's credit, C418's music is a deeply resonant creative choice in evoking the feelings from the game that he does. I don't think it's unfair to say that the soundtrack does do a lot of the heavy lifting. But that's just the thing. It was a choice. Minecraft's creator Notch felt something when he heard that music and decided that he wanted the game to be about that something. Whether he did so consciously or not, and understanding what it was, that's what art is. It's expression. And designing a game is a work of art. I've grappled with accepting that myself. Growing up in an era where the debate about the legitimacy of video games as a medium of expression was constantly tossed back and forth between controversies of sexually or violently charged content, and the perception from adults that video games were just children's toys. The image of beating a man to death with his own arm in Gears of War 3 is an image that's still burned into my brain like Malevelon Creek. As I've gotten older though, I've come to fully embrace that view of it, pushing past my predilections over games I personally found to be lacking a standard of quality towards portraying their vision that had me hung up on that question. Somewhere along the way, I realized I'd mostly just been a snob, gatekeeping games as an art by dismissing games that bored or disappointed me in their vision as lacking any inherent value as art, keeping me on the fence about the subject. What helped me realize that was understanding that one form of art we often take for granted was a form I tended to lean into most, and how my narrow view of what constituted art stemmed from delegitimizing my own work in the form of writing, as not quite being art. I've written all my life. There are stories all over the place online I don't care to be affiliated with any longer, mostly because they're from a time in my life I've outgrown. Not out of shame, but disinterest. That's a product of growth. I've moved on to answer some of the questions those early works grappled with, and now instead have a collection of works on my computer that haven't seen the light of day because of the classic artist dilemma. Growing and evolving ideas so quickly as I write that I question the worth of the art I'm working on and struggle to finish any of it. However, I know I'll find the space and confidence to publish some of it someday. I'm young enough to know that I can still see it in my future. That time just isn't now, and I'm okay with that most of the time. So when I look at Minecraft, I see the choice to include C418 as the sounds of Minecraft as a very intentional stroke by its creator in a portrait to portray meaning. In that same way, I see the end as an intentional stroke too, and that's the piece of the puzzle I'd been missing for years. It finally fell into place for me as I reflected on the foundations of the pyramid I was building in my game. It gave me the context to understand what everyone is getting at when I think they try to capture into words why Minecraft feels the way it does. To me, attempting to explain that is begging the question, what is Minecraft about? The pyramid I was building was massive. I had to use scaffolding and featherfall armor to make any reasonable progress on it, and the whole time I was doing it, I was wondering what even was the point, which naturally begged the question of what even was the point of Minecraft, also thinking to myself, gosh, this would be so much easier if I had Elytra. So naturally, I considered going to the end and getting in order to ease the process of building. The thing I haven't mentioned yet is I'm not entirely a solo streamer. I started this project because I want to get familiar with the ins and outs of streaming, of VTubing, and building skills to help another aspiring streamer who is very close to me, my wife. Queso Fresa is a woman who means a lot to me. She's been with me through the lowest of the lows in my life, and stuck by my side through all the tumultuous phases I went through that pushed away virtually every other person I've ever known. Even when life sometimes took us in different directions, we always came back to each other, staying close friends through most of our adult lives. As I settled down and learned what that phrase meant, not settling down for someone because you don't feel you have any other prospects, but settling down your youthful angst and seeing with renewed clarity what you actually want for your life, I saw that the person I envisioned finding someday as my partner had been beside me for years. So when she confided in me that she'd always wanted to be a streamer, I made a promise. One of many I have made to her in my commitment to see life through with each other. As it so happened, I hit a point in my life where I could start progressing towards fulfilling that promise. And with that shared life came a shared Minecraft world, and one of those other promises. I wanted to see the end for the first time again with her by my side. Now, suffice to say, I'm not some kind of Minecraft god. I'm a bit of a klutz. Like I said earlier, I take for granted in video games in general that we have a health bar and it can be replenished, and make a lot of really bad calls in my impatience, knowing I'm separated from any real consequences like pain or death by the screen of my monitor. But Queso Fresa, in actuality, had never played Minecraft before I introduced it to her. She's a gamer, don't get me wrong. She's played video games all her life like me, but she's a cozy gamer, who doesn't play a lot of high coordination games. The most action she's been a part of before joining me in my games was the Halo series with her brother, and that was when we were still riding bikes and flying paper planes over a decade ago. She makes me look like an Olympic gold medalist in video games by comparison, something I have to remind her and myself of from time to time because my ego does not need that inflation. So, going to the end has kind of been off limits until she gets better at the game. And despite what I said about being a solo streamer, she rarely has the time to join me as she studies to become a teacher, having discovered her lot in life after a long, difficult personal journey of her own that I won't delve into here. So while building my central pyramid and tearing it down, rebuilding it up again as I tried to work out what exactly it was that I was trying to do with the shape, a shape I'm still not entirely happy with, mind you, I did a lot of reflecting on the end. I was getting by just fine without the elytra, and besides, the build I was doing was the mob grinder for me to produce the materials I'd need to make rockets and TNT and all that jazz in the first place. In retrospect, I'm a little upset with how much it does produce, because I definitely overcompensated on the drop rates. But then again, it's been running a few hundred hours since I started building it. Feels cheap. It feels like it's already encroaching on that friction I talked about earlier. I don't know, maybe I'll redesign it later. What I do know is, while I was thinking about the end, I was thinking about the point of even adding one in the first place. Why put in an end credits goal in the first place in a game that has no real end to the experience? Before we had Elytra, before we had Chokers or Chorus Fruit or Endermites, it was a really puzzling decision. One that begged enough of a question that I watched people complain about the decision online, and then I watched as people express relief at the inclusion of all these little goodies tied to it. For my own take, it just felt like there was a reason to it I understood in the back of my head. Felt weird if I thought about it too long, but ultimately seemed pretty inconsequential and just moved on. Well, there's been a lot of discussion about the lore implications of Minecraft and its end. I don't think those matter so much as the thematic purpose to it in general. The lore is there to be analyzed and dissected to interpret and reinforce the themes. That's how storytelling is done, and Minecraft only has one thing to center its narrative structure around. You. Us. The player. Steve. Me. A lot of games will give you false endings, rolling the end credit screen and placing you back somewhere in the world to continue playing to your heart's content. Most often these games are open world with some kind of sandbox elements, giving you a chance to wrap up objectives you didn't complete, like finding collectibles, locations, or optional quests. Even in other survival games, there are often goals to work towards and an array of content to progress through that guides your play. The Forest series is all about escaping the horrors you've been confined with. Palworld asks you to defeat a colorful array of ideologically motivated and increasingly powerful gang bosses. Ark sees you overcoming a series of challenges and mistakes made in the wake of those who came before you to fight for humanity against an alien, mutant, cybernetic virus thing. I don't know what the heck is going on in that game. I'm just there for the dinosaurs, man. On the surface, Minecraft never really asks you to go to the end, much like most of these games. However, each of these games gives you a degree of motivation to do so. The Forest especially is deeply intertwined with a very clear narrative, even if its story is told without any voice acting. Palworld leaves you a little more freedom to explore the island and wonder about the mysterious setting and its ancient structures, tantalizing you with far-off monuments, but forcing you to explore with upgrade requirements. Ark dangles a similar mystery in front of you right from the start, your character clawing at the invasive implant that is apparently freshly grafted into your arm, bearing the same shape as the obelisks on the distance and the supply drops that help you survive. Minecraft, on the other hand, litters its world at random with structures, life, and ruins that may or oftentimes may not have anything to do with getting to the end. From the variety of ruins to trial chambers, nether portals, villages, dungeons, mineshafts, woodland manors, outposts, bastions, nether fortresses, igloos, ocean monuments, ancient cities, and of course the end fortresses themselves, players have theorized as to the connection between all these structures without any solid answers from the game to link it all together besides one. Free the end. I wondered what that meant. It's such an odd way to word it, isn't it? It's such a powerful way to word it that most theories hinge on it. Theorists wager their entire theses on the idea that the Ender Dragon is some kind of jailer, tyrant, despot that has chained the world to its very existence in some way. A lot of the environmental world building does seem to add up. Throughout our playtime, we come across ruin after ruin that does a pretty good job of telling us something came before us, someone, and somehow, all they left behind were ruins. If this dragon is here, associated with the end of the game, and killing it frees the dimension in some way, then it's a safe assumption that it has something to do with all that. But, like I said, I'm not all that interested in talking about it on a literal level. Do I have my thoughts? Yeah. Like, it's kinda interesting that the dragon itself seems a bit trapped, bound to its final arena to some degree by the crystals it relies on for its quasi-immortal state. Further, there's a bit of an implication that the Endermen themselves, at least, aren't the least bit trapped, wandering aimlessly between dimensions with their teleportation abilities. Especially considering once you do slay the dragon, nothing about the game really changes. You just have a dragon egg as a trophy now, and maybe some sweet loot if you did a little exploration before leaving. It's certainly possible that the Endermen are the warped remnants of those that came before. There are good hints to that. However, to wrap back around to my point, I think what matters is what the devs seem to be saying by making these choices. Not knowing is half the battle, so I can't really speak much to the validity of the idea that the Endermen might represent some kind of metaphorical overreach that warps them into literal and figurative shadows of their former selves, obsessed with expansion so greatly they accidentally mess with some cosmic balance in pursuit of immortality that has them trapped in their new form. What I can say is that the idea of freeing the end doesn't seem related to them at all, and more to us, the player. After all, the notification in our advancement screen is only for us to see. Maybe the end update will change everything. Maybe there is more yet to be revealed that will prove me wrong and I'll eat my words. But to me, it seems like the idea of freeing the end has more to do with us as players, freeing ourselves from the cycle of chasing expansion and optimization of our world, and the idea that the world has to progress to something in the first place to have meaning. As I built my humble little pyramid, wondering if there was any point to it all, I thought a lot about my own beliefs in regards to this in the real world. I'm an atheist. I don't believe there's a reason to our existence, or that we were put on this earth with any specific purpose beyond just our biological imperative. Survive. To me, resources aren't there to be harvested by us. Civilization is a tool we came up with to protect each other, often grapples with itself and the inherent and power disruptions it creates. And life just finds a way. And so it was funny to me that in nearly 15 years of playing this game, it never really occurred to me that the lack of the point of the game could be the point. I struggled a lot with anxiety growing up. I made sense of the world the best I could with nature, crime, history, and cryptid documentaries, turning to nature and myth in a similar way that my ancestors did before me to understand my place in the world and quell my anxieties. The thing is, the anxiety was about connection. We're social animals. We don't feel safe without strong bonds to others reassuring us that someone will come looking if we're lost in the dark, snatched up by lions or tigers or bears, and someone will care. That will wear you down no matter how strong you think you are. Some people function fine enough, remaining productive members of society, despite what to me seems like a clearly deep hole or hunger they're chasing to fill, convinced it's just the way the world works and they need to be a shadow of themselves in order to survive. It seems that way to me, because that was me. And I don't think people can actually live that way. Maybe it's something you can get away with your whole life, build empires off of, and legacies of greatness. It certainly felt like it when I was at my darkest. Again, without trying to sound like an authority on something I'm not educated on, respectfully, I don't think that's how the world works at all. I've talked extensively about this with people who are authorities on the topic, and they all say just about the same thing. It might be a misunderstanding or miscommunicating it, but people basically had midlife crises and coming to Jesus moments over it, historically speaking. Now we have quarter life crises instead, because awareness around the stress and pressure we put on ourselves to constantly progress our lives and improve our station has become more widespread, leading to earlier identification about what matters to us, and so we build an intolerance to maltreatment far sooner now, often referred to as burnout in a more gaslighty way. I absorb the message that my worth could be measured by the amount of value I produce to a company, the amount of pride I brought my family, the amount of people I could convince to like me. But meaning isn't inherent in the world, and I think Minecraft deliberately obfuscates any meaning in its world too, in order to capture that message. Maybe nobody will like or care about my little pyramid and the construction I have planned beyond it. Maybe it won't have any meaning at all, and maybe neither does this video. But none of it really did in the first place. My game isn't about making the biggest build or the best ways to farm resources. My game isn't about defeating a dragon as fast as I can or having the most powerful equipment. For me, the meaning in freeing the end is freeing ourselves from the constraints of having to be something we're not. Freeing ourselves from the idea that survival means expansion, progression, or advancement, continuously consuming everything around us, chasing some arbitrary goal on the horizon that we think will one day come and free us from our gnawing hunger in our hearts if we could just get there. In the end, it's up to us to determine what has meaning in life. And when I look to the woman who became my wife standing beside me for the first time, not to the blinding light of the sun on the horizon, I found people, and they mean something to me. Not for anything other than they exist. So why can't I mean something to them? Why can't that be what Minecraft means? Sometimes I still feel like an imposter. Like I don't do enough for the people around me to earn their love and respect. I struggle to love and respect myself. But something I realized a while back is a lot of people struggle with those feelings. We desperately want to know we matter, and ensure that those around us have a reason to care about us, some more desperately than others. We put on personalities, adhere to trends and norms, produce value to companies we work for and societies we live in, all in a bid to prove to others that we are worthy of mattering to someone. And it's ironic because it's those masks we wear, the lies we tell about who we are, in adhering to whatever standards we perceive about who we should be, that end up keeping others from seeing the real us. That makes us feel like we're frauds. So to answer the final question and left unanswered, asked all the way at the beginning of the story, yeah, I was the problem. Minecraft has been trying to tell us what it is about all along. I just wasn't listening. And if videos obsessed with dissecting the ins and outs of the minute details of the lore are anything to go by, there's a lot of other people who aren't listening too. I was terrified of being rejected for who I am, and I still am. It never really goes away. It's part of who we are. We're social animals. But I lived inside a mask for so long, isolating myself from the very thing I was looking for, that it was terrifying when people could see through it. And it became terrifying to meet people who seemed earnest and open with who they were. It flew in the face of everything I believed about being able to be accepted by others, and reminded me of how I felt like a fraud of a human being. Maybe on some level, it is still true. Maybe we're all frauds. The hedgehog dilemma, you know? But we're all frauds living in a very real world, and I think that it's still something very real that deserves some empathy. Because even if we are, one thing will never be fraud. You were alive, and the universe said, I love you. And the universe said, you have played the game well. And the universe said, everything you need is within you. And the universe said, you are stronger than you know. And the universe said, you are the daylight. And the universe said, you are the night. And the universe said, the darkness you fight is within you. And the universe said, the light you seek is within you. And the universe said, you are not alone. And the universe said, you are not separate from every other thing. And the universe said, you are the universe, tasting itself, talking to itself, reading its own code. And the universe said, I love you, because you are love. If you made it this far, thank you. I trust that you know what to do if you feel this earned your support. I stream here and on Twitch every Thursday, Friday, and Sunday, and sometimes more when I can. I post updates on my socials if you want to keep up with the space I'm building. I'd love to have you along. Last and most importantly, please remember, as the sun must set, so too must it rise.